skulls. The next moment he went silent. We scrambled into formation, right before his arms and legs came raining down on us. One of your comrades, or someone ordered to kill you. Think. Does anyone here bear a grudge against you? Who would target you, specifically? The one that covers the parasite that lives on the surface of the skull's bodies is what gives them their power.
Major, do you like my gift?
They do something to your eyes? No, it's just bright as all.
Miller was in contact with Cypher 9 years ago. He was working with them. He's the traitor, Snake!
Go. She won't speak, so she can't spread the infection. Eyes on Kazuhira. A message from the parasites.
Eyes on Kazuhira, words we know all too well and often spoken by Kotalker, an elder Native American with vast knowledge on the parasites of which he received in his early life as a biologist. Known as the one that covers, extracted from the ends and the pain's remains, which gave them supernatural abilities like photosynthesis and harnessing of insects. And these parasites were the genesis of humanity and what gave us the ability to speak apparently.
The vocal cord parasites were once in symbiosis with man. Its genes even became a part of his. Humans and parasites are extremely close.
Kotalker injected the End's photosynthetic parasite into himself, thus giving him the ability to possess photosynthetic abilities in which he supplied them with water, and in return they provided him with nourishment through sugars they produce when exposed to sunlight. Gotta love the science, right? Characters like Quiet and of course the End possess these abilities. It's been 10 long years, and the fandom still asks questions, and speculates with their own headcanons. MGS5 is a game I believe purposely designed this way. The game doesn't advertise a factual narrative, but one left open for us to determine. In this wild theory, we're going to take a look at characters like Kaz and even Venom Snake to determine if they may have had a strain of the parasites to begin with within them. And yes, I know what you're thinking.
Nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Given on the evidence, there really isn't a lot to go on, is there? So Kaz never shows any signs of carrying the parasites from the one that covers to the weaponized vocal cord parasites. Kaz doesn't show any special abilities like Quiet or Kotalker or any characters from MGS3 for that matter, nor the Skulls. And we don't see him digest water through his skin, but it's hard to really be certain what he does in his spare time, considering we barely ever see Kaz in the game. The only evidence we have got is the cryptic message from Kotalker. The parasites are practically living organisms, and they internally speak to Kotalker, acting as messengers from beyond his skin.
It isn't just my skin either. The parasites also act as my eyes. They have replaced many of my internal organs as well. It is thanks to them that I live on after over a century.
He shares some details about Ocelot's aim being off and some guys speaking by some containers and Kazuhira's eyes. But now this is where I think the theory holds some validity, and it's quite bizarre. So, using mods, I removed Miller's sunglasses, and interestingly, post-Phantom Limb's mission, Kaz's eyes looks normal, a hazily green colour. Of course, the other eye is shut because, well, it's most likely swollen. Whilst this doesn't indicate a lot, later in the game, once Kaz has settled into Mother Base, his eyes change entirely. And we first see this upon returning to base with Quiet, and from then onwards. I mean, yes, this could simply just be a model change to represent the fact Kazuhira's eyesight is poor, because he's not really blind, he can still see, but it doesn't explain the fact on how in the space of time from arriving to the base and shortly thereafter, after a while, his eyes just went from being a normal colour to completely white and glazed over. I just don't buy it. Now, we do have to take into account symbology that we often see throughout the series, with certain mediums like Venom Snake's shrapnel indicating that he has become a demon, hence why it changes given on the morality system in the things that you do. I mean, it's same with Miller's eyes. It could represent more than biology, it might just be metaphorical. The deeper he sinks into vengeance, the more twisted his view becomes, literally. His moral clarity clouds. The man who once wanted peace with Big Boss is now consumed by revenge and mistrust against his own unit.
It's the man to your left. To your right. Assume nothing. Report everything.
Either way, it supports the idea that MGS5 was doing something subversive with Kaz's appearance, something quietly unsettling. Venom Snake talking about his eyes, Kaz referring to his eyes whilst taking his glasses off for the first time, revealing these eyes, with the camera purposely focused on them, and Kotoka's sentiment that talks about Kaz's eyes. I mean, come on, he does have some nice looking eyes. What I'm trying to say is nothing is done by mistake. It's little subtle hints without giving us a clear answer. When Kaz spoke and said, "You'll be my eyes" to Diamond Dogs, its meaning could go beyond them just helping him walk around Mother Base without falling into the ocean. I think it's symbolic of his statement, to keep an eye out for traders. Prior to the Phantom Pain incident, Miller was actually still doing some work for Cypher and was under Skullface's jurisdiction in Africa.
Not our man, Major. He's been making some moves.
Miller? Yes, I know. Rhodesia, is it?
Yes, and up to his old tricks again.
No matter. He'll stumble soon enough.
Although he is under my jurisdiction now.
And at this time, all kinds of research was taking place, including the actual blueprints for the Miller burgers. Particularly the parasites, of course, but Miller was captured by Skullface and his units known as the Skulls. All of his crew was killed, of course, apart from Miller, and it is possible during this time that Skullface could have experimented on Miller with the parasites as he had others. I mean, why the fuck not, right? You've got them at your disposal, you may as well test them out. During the 1980s, Skullface forced Kotoka to reverse engineer the parasites to target specific languages, as we saw with the epidemic at Mother Base surrounding Afghanistan and Africa, and even the Soviet forces to perfect the vocal cord parasites. I mean, as seen in The Devil's House, language is often weaponized. It's possible Miller may have been infected with a form of the parasites, and what doesn't make any sense is why Skullface would pawn him off to the Soviets unless it's greatly benefited his agenda, which it did. Since the Soviets occupied Afghanistan, XOF needed facilities that the Soviets were obviously gladly to offer in exchange for the likes of gear walkers, and so they could build the fucking philanthropists. And obviously the Soviets weren't interested in Miller. It was more than likely Ocelot who planned to retrieve him, since he was working with the Soviets as well. Hence the nickname he earned, called Shalashaska.
I am Shalashaska, also called Revolver Ocelot.
He used Miller in his plan as a Cypher Patriot member that he is, as a little exercise for Venom Snake, like we've seen Ocelot do before in the series. It's unclear if Miller was afflicted with the English strain of the vocal cord parasites, hence why we only had 3 days tops to rescue him before he succumbed to his death. Skullface knows Miller's an affiliate to Big Boss who speaks English, which could have been a great insurance policy to kill Big Boss through Miller if, assuming Skullface thought he was alive, and in turn could have wiped out the English language as he always intended. And it's goodbye fucking Britannia, I suppose.
Rule Britannia is out of bounds.
It's implied when Skullface infected Major Zero with the parasites that completely debilitated him and rendered him a fucking vegetable, and Big Boss did the right thing by putting him out of his fucking misery. Skullface also became infected from it in his attempt to infect Zero, which is a big L. Kotoka instructed him to undergo radiation therapy to treat it, which in turn worked in keeping him alive essentially, but he relies on the parasites to keep him alive, so technically he should be dead. He's just a walking corpse that's depending on the parasites. It is plausible that Miller could have undergone a similar treatment before he became a carrier to spread the infection or from killing it through the same means with radiation or whatever. That's if he was even infected at all. And even if he is, maybe there's a missing link, perhaps another strain of the parasite, like a dormant strain. Miller might have been used as a test subject for a controlled immunity. Either way, it's inoculated with perhaps a dead parasite strain that's ineffective. Or maybe he was exposed repeatedly to develop a sort of tolerance. This would explain why during the outbreak missions at Mother Base, Miller is always nearby but never really gets infected, even when the air is thick with contagious spores, because perhaps he develops a relationship with the parasites. As I've said, there's not enough evidence to point to this theory after gathering most prominent subjects that are infected with the parasites. That's if you want to include venom. We see patterns in the pictures. But however, and you won't believe this guys because it's easily overlooked, there is one piece of strong evidence that suggests that Miller had some form of parasite resistance treatment, because if you remember, everyone at Mother Base during the whole quarantine section was issued the Wolbachia treatment, the bacteria when introduced into the parasite that causes all males to become female, for sterilizing them and halting the spread of the parasite, and ultimately making the whole sterile and rendering their ability to reproduce. It was essentially a mandatory procedure to prevent the parasites, right? However, here is what tips the whole theory into a plausible truth, is that Miller had a child roughly around the late 1980s to the early 90s. Catherine, Miller's daughter, who is mentioned in Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake on the MSX manual, under Master Miller's biography, which suggests that she was to have a minor codec role, who was a witch to inform Solid Snake via radio that her daddy is not available to talk due to his going fishing, providing Snake with a new radio frequency to contact him, which, if so, implies Catherine was still a child at the time of Operation Intrude F-014, which took place during the 1990s, which means she was born in the early 90s, so it defeats the idea that Miller could have had a child before the parasite infection. I mean, he did lay one girl on Mother Base during the Peace Walker incident, but that's unclear whether his pull-out game was good enough or if he used protection, because either so, she would be a lot more grown up than the daughter that's implied in the MSX version.
But he has hit on every single one of the few female soldiers here at Mother Base. They ought to be telling him where to stick it, but end up falling for it so easily. I think some of it stems from the fact that he is actually not that bad looking.
Which means Miller didn't take any treatment of the parasites in MGS5 because he simply didn't need them. However, it is worth taking into account that Metal Gear Solid has been retconned many times, including MGS5, that kind of contradicts things that have happened in the MSX games. It is some pretty powerful evidence to suggest, if we're going off the canon of the games of what we know, to suggest that Miller is resistant to these parasites somehow. And it's fair to say if Miller was infected with the parasites, it's more than likely he has the one that covers that his body is essentially just like Code Talker's, symbiotically embraced in the parasites. As we know, the parasites grants the user different abilities, but they all share the same skill of photosynthesis and water. Miller doesn't demonstrate any uncanny abilities like Quiet's, but then again, when you think about it, neither does Code Talker, he just sits in a wheelchair. But it is possible to say that he has the one that covers, but does a good job of hiding it. Hence wearing his glasses. We notice black markings as well around some of the characters as a clear indication. Skullface even covers his marks with a mask. It appears that even with his parasites, or the parasites, it doesn't always grant people superpowers. But aside from that, what I find unusual as well is Miller's hunch that Quiet is working with Cypher.
Did you get her? With those abilities of hers? No doubt about it. She has to be one of the Skulls. Now move in and finish your boss. She's working for Cypher.
No way she's setting foot on this base.
It is possible that it's more than likely these two may have crossed paths when Skullface and Miller bumped, paths in Africa, hence why he seems so desperate to remove her from the base. but doesn't want to let on to Big Boss his affiliation at the time with working with Cypher again, because it makes him look like a traitor. There's an interesting scene as well when Ocelot interrogates Huey that leads the mission to Africa and Cypher's research there. The camera specifically pans towards Miller, looking sheepish with his back turned to Snake and Ocelot, overhearing what really he already knew. Miller as a character gives off suspicious vibes, even though he casts it on everyone else. The guy is sus. So many of the characters share these eyes, right? The parasites actually aid Core-Talker that act as his eyes, hence why he can probably see things others cannot. Perhaps Miller was referring to the parasite when he said, "You will be my eyes."
You will be my eyes.
Just as he takes off his shades, and when you think about it, Kaz's suspicions of an enemy in their midst were true, that everyone pretty much was overlooked, such as Quiet, who hypothetically, and I say this in quotations, could have killed the majority of Diamond Dogs and the boss. Not to mention Huey and his experiments to the parasites and selling the research to Cypher, thus the death of Miller's comrades and the events in Ground Zeroes. Perhaps the parasites were speaking to Miller, hence eyes on Kazuhira, a message from the parasites. But even with these strange eyes indicating the parasites, it's still not enough evidence, because characters like Skullface and Quiet have parasites, but their eyes are unaffected. It's only the people in the Devil's House and the Skulls and the puppet soldiers who get infected and turned by the Skulls' gases that they emit from the parasites. It just may be that the parasite respond differently to other hosts, infecting their organs in other ways.
Well, I'm sure you'll see the bigger picture eventually.
But honestly, the eyes on Kazuhira seems like a warning from the parasites or Core-Talker, basically telling Snake to keep an eye on Kaz because of his traitorous nature. I mean, look at the ending dialogue. Kaz wanted to destroy Big Boss, which makes no sense because Big Boss didn't betray anybody, it was Cypher who made these plans in motion. He was building his secret nation to oppose Cypher, and wasn't that meant to be Miller's plans too? Well, obviously not. Now, we come to Venom Snake. Now there's nothing on Venom being infected with the parasites throughout the entire game. His eye discoloration makes sense, considering Big Boss has only one eye. It's either his eye was damaged after the helicopter crash during the Ground Zeroes incident, or was done intentionally to fully recreate Big Boss's face in surgery. It's most likely the case since at the start of MGS5, we create our avatar and our faces are changed to snakes, which, as a side note, off from the theory, I think really ruined the plot of the story. I get the symbolic message behind it that we are connected to Big Boss as the player through the avatar, but its placement made no sense, at least at the beginning, and afterwards then maybe so. But anyway, on to Venom Snake's abilities, which must be incredible because a few times in the game he's in battle with the Skulls and not once is he affected by the gases and particles that the Skulls emit. I mean, yes, we don't see him exactly go and give the Skulls a hug in the cutscenes, but as the player we can literally get face to face with them and interact with these gases. You know, when everyone turns into puppet soldiers, he remains the same and unchanged. The game gives no explanation how he can resist. Some theories suggest before Zero became brain dead, he may have injected Venom Snake with a form of the one who covers, or the parasite, since he was aware of their existence, hence, you know, Venom Snake's superhuman strength and quick speed without running out of breath. But we all know that the quick sprint function was all thanks down to the bionic arm, which doesn't make any sense, but it's Metal Gear logic, so there you go. And why we never see Venom Snake eat and he just so happens to have a shower conveniently on the main platform rather than a buffet. However, once again, there's still not enough evidence, and it's not surprising. He's not infected. The vocal cord parasite only targeted those with specific strains. He didn't catch the Pasteur strain in Afghanistan because it was the Kakongo strain that was found in the patients that were symptomatic or dying on Mother Base, and the children Snake rescued were the carriers. Non-Kakongo speakers could carry the parasite asymptomatically. If Snake was carrying anything, it was temporarily silenced by the dank herb that Kotoka gave him. And plus, most of Snake's men and himself received the Wolbachia treatment, so it rendered the parasite unable to reproduce, effectively neutering the infection. And mutated parasite strains could only spread by proximity in saliva, and speech, of course, wasn't the only thing that was required. It could land on clothing or anything else. Ultimately, Snake took the right precautions to prevent the infection, if you look back, including the second outbreak, and somehow got really lucky when Quiet called for help, speaking the English language, but she does only so briefly, and because her lungs are fried, you know, the parasites can't eat her lungs and pass the larvae and infection onto Venom Snake. The parasite element of MGS5 plot was very poorly executed, to say the least. I mean, let's be honest. If Quiet could have spoke English the entire time without it infecting anyone, then why keep it fucking silent? Plus, it takes away from the dark element of the game that could have been widely expanded on. Plus, it doesn't explain how Venom is resistant to being zombified like the others. With a bit more careful consideration of the parasites, it could have been extended into much more of an impactful story if these little elements could have been explained. However, given on the complex nature of MGS's series, it can easily be forgiven and made for a cool storyline. Well, with this theory, there's no concrete evidence behind Kotoka's words, only interpretations of the audience. It could really just be as simple as Miller having cataracts, which was poorly presented, let's be honest. Which, you know, at the start of when we meet Miller in the first part when we rescue him, his eyes already should have been presented with cataracts, considering his eyes were fine in the phantom limbs. It's understandable with Kotoka because he's really old and over 100 years old, so he has cataracts too. I guess we'll never know, but either way it's left open for you guys to decide. Anyway, I just want to say thank you so much for watching, and hit that like button, turn the notification bells on for more Konami and Kojima content because YouTube loves to shadow ban me, and consider subscribing. And I just want to say thank you for watching, and remember, until we meet again.
There's no such thing in the world as absolute reality. Most of what they call real is actually fiction. What you think you see is only as real as your brain tells you it is.
Then, what am I supposed to believe in?
It's for you to decide. It's up to you.